now. And what I would ask as well is if anyone had any information about how they're specifically using MSPCFO to make decisions in their business and how it's achieved results, we'd love to have you participate on a call as well. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Rex, and I'll let him begin. If you have any questions, please feel free to use the Q&A function on the system. I'll be asking Rex questions as we go along. And I look forward to what Rex has to share. Rex, over to you.
Howdy, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Well, hey, everybody. My name is Rex Frank, president and founder of C-Level Operations. Through my career, I was an engineer turned service manager turned service executive. About 6 years ago, I founded C-Level Operations with one core purpose in mind, that's coaching MSPs on achieving operational excellence. So we've been having a great time doing that, hooked up with Larry a few years ago. So that's a quick introduction to C-Level. Anyway, Larry asked me to put together a presentation on how I use the MSPCFO data to make decisions, and I kind of boiled it down to, I really want to go after the tough decisions, right? So decision number one, am I getting the margin I need? Number two, am I charging enough? And number three, are my QBRs working? So I figured I would grab a couple screenshots and we can just go through talking about that. Larry, I'm hoping to make this interactive with you and me, and Larry, you'll be watching to make sure we catch the questions as they come in, right? Well, I'm assuming Larry's still there. So anyway.
Hold on for 1 second, Rex. Somebody's saying they're having difficulty hearing.
Okay.
Can somebody just submit a question if they are able to or not able to?
Larry, can you hear me okay?
I can hear you.
They should probably submit a ticket.
Everybody said they can hear just fine. So the one person who's not able to hear, I'd suggest you either re-log in or check your volume.
Or call in.
Or call in. I think they tried both.
Okay.
Thank you. Keep going.
So anyway, under you know, am I getting the margin I need? I kind of boiled that down to, well, that's going to come from three separate questions. How much do I need? Should I be paying an engineer? When is it time to hire? And should we be firing a client? So I'll dive into that. So under that question of how much to compensate an engineer, well, my thing is an engineer should bill 3 times their pay, okay? Oh, and if an engineer can't bill 3 times their pay, I'm paying them too much. If they're billing more than 3 times their pay, I'm not paying them enough. My next slide, I'll go into that a little bit deeper there. But if you're in your MSPCFO, and hopefully if you're on the webinar, you go over, you're running MSPCFO on another window or something, because you should be looking at your own numbers. But right here, when I go to member, billing by period, and you notice I selected about, several months up there. Is that about 6 months worth of data? And I'm looking at that engineer's averages. That number needs to be at least 3 times their pay. So if the third from the bottom there, 69.46, if I'm paying that person $2,200 a month and they're billing $6,900, they're being paid about right. If I'm paying them $3,000 a month, their billing's a little bit low. It would be $36,000 a year. If I'm paying them $5,000 a month, if I'm paying $60,000 a year, and they're only billing $7,000, I got a big problem. There's a problem with that engineer knowing how to convert their time into billing dollars. And ultimately, that's what they need to do. We need to keep the company in business and keep the company profitable. Every engineer has a responsibility to convert their time into billing dollars. And on this billing by period, that's where everything is boiled down to one number. Is that engineer their total billing, and is that more than 3 times their pay? Larry, feel free to jump in if you have any comments or questions, or if anybody's putting any questions in.
All the questions so far are about the audio, so it seems to be okay.
Okay. Do you have any comment on this topic, on how to use the data in MSPCFO to know where to set your engineer compensation? No? Okay.
So far, we do have one question.
Okay.
Ethan, you had a question?
Well, you might have to read it because he's probably muted unless you unmuted him.
The average is to be the engineer's comp. Let's keep going and we'll come back to it.
Okay. No, so this is their total billing. I want their pay to be about 1/3 of that. So this person lost it. This person right here billing 24,000. You know, if I'm paying them more than 8,000 a month, I've got a problem. This person billing 17. You know, if it's a $60,000 engineer divided by 12 is 5,000 a month. Times 3 would be 15,000. So, you know, if an average pay is around 60K, I try to look for a 15,000 number here per engineer. So this is a slide that was in one of the previous Learn with Larry's I did, but I wanted to kind of bring it back in that this is basically a P&L right here of what I think a service department, service company's P&L should look like, something very similar to this. If we got $1 in revenue coming in, we should have about 33 cents going out in direct labor. Now this is, you know, for those of you that are in HTG and service leadership, this is a raw pay number. This is not including taxes and benefits and cell phones and ConnectWise licenses that engineers cost. This is just their salary, you know, their hourly pay plus their bonus. I want to keep that under 33%. That, you know, the numbers I think more like 46% or 47% if you load in all the taxes, benefits, salary, all that. But just to keep it simple, I like to go on that number. And looking at this, you know, if I'm at 33%, engineers are billing 3 times their pay. And I'm going to hire if direct labor as a percent of raw gross margin is 35% or lower. And I'm feeling good about the economy, the pipeline, you know, whatever you have in your sales pipeline. If I feel like I'm going to need another engineer and, you know, I'm about 35% or lower, I'm probably going to make a hire. If it's over 45% of my direct labor here, there's no way I'm making a hire. We already have a big efficiency problem and that needs to be fixed. And then on the next slide, we're going to talk about firing bad clients. But one of the things I always say, and I think all the C-level coaches say, is at that moment when you need to hire an engineer, maybe the better option is to fire bad clients to get your hours back. But so we can dive into that. So with that in mind,
Rex, just hold up. There's actually 2 questions that came up so far.
Okay. Okay.
The first one is, how do you confirm that billing for a tech is correct? And I think I want to address that. So the billing is what comes out of MSPCFO, and MSPCFO obviously is what comes out of ConnectWise. We try to work with everyone to make sure the data is in there correctly and set up properly. There can be issues where there are inconsistencies, which require a certain level of vigilance on both of our sides. One thing that C-level recommends is to engage the engineers in participating in their compensation, sharing how much their billing is. Because if you're going to pay someone based on a metrics-based compensation plan, you better make sure the metrics are accurate because the person that you're paying is going to test you on that. So we do, C-level encourages, that's a decision that each company has to make, sharing this data with your techs, and it gives you just yet another set of eyes. There can always be a bad cost, there can always be something that comes through that needs to be adjusted, and we can work with you if that is identified. The second question we have is, can MSP...
Well, one thing I'd like to throw in there, MSPCFO is going to have the data as you have it in ConnectWise. So I don't know that I agree with this statement that what if there's bad data in MSPCFO. I think the right statement is what if there's bad data in ConnectWise.
Right, and one thing MSPCFO will do is highlight that for you. The second question is, can MSPCFO do a report for this? We have the salary info, and the answer to that question is we don't always have the salary info. It's only if you enter it directly into the system. We may have the hourly costs of the individual, which we can pull as well. But we can take a look at your service gross margin to give you this data. If this is something, this is going back to where I started the call, if this is something that people think will help them towards that question of hiring and firing, and you're going to execute against it, we would be happy to build this in. Direct labor cost of goods sold, hard growth, give you the services gross margin.
So I think my next slide can help answer that.
Go ahead.
Right here, I'm looking at the P&L by client screen. Okay, and I've included 5 or 6 months here, 7 months, something like that. But I'm looking across here at this number, right? So the inverse of that is my direct labor cost. So, you know, if I'm looking at 86% here as my labor contribution percentage, at 100 minus that number, so 100 minus 86 is 14% labor cost. Now, I put in italics here. I'm working in, Larry gave me some sample data. It's sort of anonymized data here. But it's, I think that there's a problem with the data in ConnectWise in that I don't think it has all the labor cost included in whatever this data is that I've pulled my screenshots out of. But on this screen, on the P&L by client, with all clients, this is where you're going to find that number. At least it's the best place I could find it in MSPCFO.
Okay, let's keep going.
Yep. Okay. Okay, so let's talk about firing a client. And this is one of the toughest decisions that I've been able to. In my coaching, I spend a lot of time working with clients, making sure their data is right so they can make good decisions, but then focusing in on this section right here. So I'm on the members FF agreement screen. I got a wide range of data there, and I put this max efficiency in of 0.6. So if we're looking at, this is all the clients where their efficiency is less than a 0.6, and that means we did $379,000 worth of work over that time frame for the equivalent of getting paid by clients $213,000. That is a lot of hours that are buried in clients that are not profitable. You know, like, and this, we're working for 56% of your normal billing rates right here. And remember, it's all about converting hours into dollars. And when we're touching these flat fee agreements, we're converting an hour into a very small amount of dollars, 56% of our normal rates. And this right here is where your toughest decisions are, right here. Why are we spending $11,000 worth of our time at our normal billing rates for $3,500 in revenue from the client? Yeah, what is that?
So one thing, Rex, I want to throw in there is, you know, this is predicated on the shadow billable. Shadow billable is a function of what you would have billed for the work role and work type.
Right.
for the service you delivered. Again, that's work role and work type gives you a billable rate times the hours that you actually do the work. And we look at that in MSPCFO on a timeline by timeline basis. So the reason I bring that up is because there's two reasons your shadow billable could be high. 9 times out of 10, it's because you're giving them too many hours. But there is that occasion where you have the client that is requiring your company to service them with your level 3 project engineers, as opposed to being handled by the help desk. That's also going to blow up your shadow billable. And the important thing is it's not just about hours, because you should care just as much if they're consuming your most valuable resources as much as if they're just consuming too many hours. So again, shadow billable is a function of both the value of the work and the hours delivered, not just the hours delivered. Rex, and there was another question that just came up. What's the lowest efficiency where you would fire a customer?
I'm looking for, well, I'm going to give two parts to the answer there. Number one is when it's low efficiency like this, the first question is, what are we doing wrong? Okay, so let's take, for example, we got an alert from, say, lab tech that a single drive in an array failed, and then we didn't act on it. And then when the second drive in the array failed, the system went down, and it took us 30 hours to put their system back together, okay? That's not a client problem. That's our problem. So the first question to always ask on any low efficiency is what are we doing wrong? And man, you got to take your defensive hat off to do that, okay? Then anything under a 0.8, God, I want to go down my I'm gonna pull out the spreadsheet. This is the 4 levers thing right here. So this is a little bit off topic, but I'm going to go ahead and do it. These are the 4 levers that you set to set service margin. You've got your annual pay of how much you pay an engineer. You've got your billing rate. You've got your utilization, which this 76% comes from right here. This is all the amount of time where we know engineers are not going to be billing, their vacation days, training days, staff meetings, that kind of thing. And I think these are very reasonable numbers, in that 492 hours a year, our engineers are not doing billing. That means that's 24% of their year. So 76% of their year, they should be doing billing, okay? So that's where that number comes from. And this ratio right here, that's what I call the 4th lever. You know, we've all been managing these 3 levers in our service organizations, you know, since time began. But this 4th lever is what's the effective ratio when we're doing flat fee billing. And so I've got a $60,000 a year person, right, which is $5,000 a month. 60 divided by 12 is 100, and I've got my billing rate set at 150. And if I look over here at this tab, right, a $60,000 a year person is making $5,000 a month. 3 times that is $15,000. At a 150 billing rate, they need to bill 100 hours. 100 hours times 150 an hour would hit their $15,000 goal, right? 100 hours is 58% of their time. So right here at a 0.8 agreement ratio, right, that means I'm 80% of my 150 rate, which means I'm at a 120 an hour effective rate, means I need to be 72% billable, or 125 hours to hit my $15,000 goal. Okay, at 132 hours is my 76%, right? So if I'm going to be just slightly over my $15,000 goal. At a 1.0 ratio, they only have to be 58% utilized, or 100 hours. but $150 an hour at 76% utilization would be, they'd be billing $19,850. So again, at 58% utilized, they're billing 100 hours at 150. They're right at their 3x goal. If they were 76% utilized, they'd be billing almost $20,000. My direct labor percent goes down. My W-2 multiple goes up. At a 1.25 agreement ratio, my 150 rate becomes 187.50 an hour. I only have to bill 80 hours or 46% utilization to hit my $15,000 in billing at this rate. You know, if I was 76% utilized on agreements at a 1.25 ratio, that same engineer is billing $25,000 a month. So my answer of 0.8 was, at a 0.8 is where they're right at 3x. A 1.0, they're at, you know, 30% direct labor. And at a 1.25, you know, so there's a $10,000 swing in how much an engineer can bill per month from a 0.8 to a 1.25. And this is that fourth lever in action. This is why they talk about managed services having leverage.
Rex, there's a question that came up, two questions actually in one from. The first question is, when you look at this, what's the recommended time range? Is it a 1 month, 3 month, 6 month time range?
To come back over here, I'm looking at least 6 months. You know, you got to be careful. If you've got a, like in the car insurance business, if you've had a client for 10 years and they've never had an accident, and then they have one where they totaled their car this month, they're still a good client, right? I want to keep them as an insured. So, for my example, I pulled 6 months worth of data. Now, keep in mind over here, once they go, you know, right around a 0.5, that's, especially a 0.3, that's where you risk, you're paying your engineers more in salary than revenue you're getting from that client. So in this sample data, this one right here, I know for sure for this 73 hours, I paid my engineer more to do this work than we got in revenue. You know, 0.5, I start getting nervous, you know, based on different efficiency factors that I might be starting to get into that category. You know, 50% of your normal billing, at 51% of your normal billing rate, you're probably not making enough margin to be worth being in business. At 31%, you're paying your engineer more than the revenue you got. 0.8, they really should be able to, if you've got your labor rate set and your engineer pay set properly, at a 0.8, you should be able to hit your 3x. At a 1.0, you're making money. At a 1.25, you're swimming in money.
The second part of the question then is, how would you look at it to see if something you've done has made a positive impact?
I would probably, and keep in mind, I don't know what data I'm looking at. I'm looking at, you know, whatever this sample is, but this efficiencies and efficiency by month. I'm looking here to make sure that number is trending up. You know, this is a client by client efficiency rating. This client, you know, I would say is probably trending up.
Right. And then, Rex, just for everybody else, this is a discussion you and I have had, which is the shading on this graph. This graph is shaded to show the changes over the trend. We've discussed making it, shading it changes off of 1, you know, whether you're above or below 1.
Yeah, a 1.3 to me should be green. And that's what Larry's bringing up. But
for which Rex and I agree to disagree on, but I'm
But anyway, but this is where I'm going to look to see, am I making positive changes, right? Is by increasing, you know, doing better client documentation, increasing my standardization, Leveraging lower cost resources to do the work, meaning I have a junior engineer billing the contract at 100 an hour and a senior engineer billing the contract at 150 an hour. The more I leverage a lower cost resource to do that work, the better my ratios are going to get. That's all part of increasing your ratios. Did I answer your question?
I think we did, yeah.
Okay. Any feedback? Am I on the right track? Trying to answer some of these questions using the data in MSPCFO.
We do not have the Smileback live function, but be engaged in asking good questions. So by all means, keep going.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, actually, you know, I changed that. As Jesse has done, please feel free to use your smiley emoticons or frowny emoticons to let us know how we're doing. And by all means, continue doing that throughout the call.
Okay. So this firing a client concept, it's incredibly scary concept to think about, right? We work so hard to capture a client, to get him to sign on a contract. And the idea of getting rid of revenue is super scary. And what I want to point out is when I say fire a client, it's sort of, I don't always mean fire a client, but what happens is most of the time you don't actually fire the client. One of three outcomes happens. Once you decide, hey, this client is on my bottom rung, they become a C client, they're not profitable, they're consuming resources at a very low labor rate, and I could be using those same resources at a higher labor rate, and meeting my margin and profit expectations. But that moment when you need to fire the client, right, or that moment when you need to hire an engineer, okay, we just cannot keep up with that workload. I need to hire somebody. That's the moment where you need hours. And I contend that the best source of hours is in your bad clients, because you've already got that engineer trained. They already know your systems. We just are using them badly. Okay, so that's the moment that you need to do it. Okay, so you go, and that's the moment where you get the guts to go to that client and say, hey, we've got a problem. You're paying me $1,000 and we're doing $3,000 worth of work every month. It's just not working for us. But the client likes you guys. And most of the time, probably 8 out of 10 times you go have this conversation with a client, they agree to pay more appropriate rates. Okay? So that's the best outcome. The best outcome is you don't have to go find a new client to replace the revenue. And they just agree to pay. And bam, problem solved, right? And by the way, if you do decide to hire rather than fire a client, until they're fully utilized, every dollar is a good dollar. There's no such thing as a bad dollar when you're underutilized, right? You got to pay for it. You either got to get rid of your engineer or you got to get as much revenue as you can. It's when you're fully utilized that you have the ability to increase your margins by getting rid of clients. Now, the option number 2 is fire the client and help them find another vendor. And like I said, that one rarely happens. But option number 3 is to go to your friendly neighborhood, competitor, who this might be a great client for, and make a deal with them to sell them this client for some percentage of the revenue over the next year. And then what ends up happening is that client will actually be profitable to you now because you're getting revenue for not having to do any labor. But the nice little side effect is because now they're overutilizing your competitor, this previous client is helping put your competitor out of business. So there's a little bonus there. But my point with this whole slide is usually you don't actually fire the client. Most of the time, because you have some real data to show them that this relationship isn't working, they'll be willing to pay appropriate rates. And never underestimate the power of a client staying with the devil they know. It's hard. You guys have to really mess up to lose a client because they know you, they know your weaknesses, and there's a big fear if they switch to another vendor. Well, what are that vendor's weaknesses are going to be, or what kind of catastrophe we're going to go through in trying to change. So they'll stay with you quite a while before they'll leave. And when they decide to leave, you've really pushed them over the edge. So, is there any questions coming in about this?
Nope. Keeps
all right.
Doing good.
So, am I charging enough? Are my T&M rates set properly, and are my agreement rates set properly? So, in order to do that, I went looking for some places in MSPCFO that can help me answer that question. So, first one, are my T&M rates set properly? So, I went to billing by member, and I looked at the actual rates column. And I used some average data. I think I put 4 months in here, but you'll get different numbers depending on what you select. But I'm looking at my total actual rates billing versus how many hours I put into that. And I'm going to do some math on the next page here. Okay, so there's that bottom line that we did 366 hours for 57,000 in billing. So I did some quick math. My average billing rate is going to be my total billing divided by my hours, right? So I got 157.25 an hour. I'm paying, and in this case, I'm saying, hey, I'm paying my engineer $5,000 a month times 3. They got a $15,000 goal. I basically said, hey, they're working 173 hours a month. If you're not familiar with that number, it's 40 hours a week times 52 weeks is 2,080 hours. A year divided by 12 months is 173.3 hours a month. Assuming a 75% utilization means roughly 130 hours that they can bill. So if I'm paying them 15, paying them $5,000, they need to bill 15, and they got about 130 hours a month they can do billing with. So that 157.25 times 130 hours means that they should be able to bill $20,000, which is above my $15,000 goal. So my average billing rate is working. And you can do this on a per engineer basis to see if what you're paying them works for your billing rates. So any questions, or Larry, do you have any feedback on that?
Nope, makes good sense.
Something I just noticed that I didn't notice when I was working on this last night, all this uninvoiced labor out here. Those, I know, and this is a question for you, Larry. I know that when this gets invoiced in whatever month it lands in, it'll hit the actual rates column. But are the hours in here yet or not?
No, they're not. So as a quick technical side note, MSPCFO pulls data based on when a record has been updated. I know I put this in several emails, and I have a call actually with ConnectWise at 4 today to discuss this. So what we do is we look at a record, and because we can't do a full feed every time we update your data, we only look for records that have been updated. An update to a record might be that the work type has changed, that an invoice has actually been sent, or that a time record which was created in 1 month has actually had an invoice number attached to it because it's been billed. What we do is we look at an updated at field. Anything that's been updated, we then just pull that record. We don't know what's been changed, but we know that that's a record we want to take a look at. We leverage this updated at. What ConnectWise has started doing poorly and actually is now doing worse than it had been doing, and we're working with them on this, is ConnectWise is changing data without changing this updated at field. So we're not seeing that the record has been changed. That's the only way that we know. On weekends, we do a 90-day look back to pick up anything that wouldn't have been caught ordinarily. All of our regular feeds are just 5-day look backs. We do a 5-day look back 4 times a day. There are times where the uninvoiced labor is higher than what ConnectWise should show, because ConnectWise has not indicated to us that they changed the record without saying that it's been changed. If this ever does happen for you, please send me an email and we can do a manual 90-day look back for you. We're happy to do it. We want the data to be accurate. We're working with ConnectWise to make the data more accurate so that we can leverage what's already in there. Sometimes, so the short of it is sometimes this number is too high, and we're working really hard for workarounds to make this more accurate for you.
Yeah. And again, I don't know any of the history of this sample data, but this internal tech time is just astronomical, where they're marking their time billable against the internal company. And you know, this is a massive numbers here. It looks like whatever the problem is, you know, whatever the sample data is, it's been getting better. But yeah, I would be having a small panic attack. One symptom of this internal tech time, dollars and hours being so high is when let's say your engineer is spending 8 hours deploying patches to your client base, and they mark that time billable against the internal company rather than doing time entries against each of your client agreements. That'll inappropriately make your client agreements look too profitable, and it'll make your internal tech number way bigger than it probably should be. So anyway, are my T&M rates set properly? This is the two numbers I would look at, and I would compare that against what I expect an engineer to bill for the month. And in this case, the numbers work out just fine. So.
Rex, a question was just raised on what actual rates equals. And an MSPCFO, actual rates are really anything that has to be billable on an hourly basis as opposed to a fixed fee. There's 4 billing rates within ConnectWise: actual, override, not to exceed, and fixed. Actual and fixed are really what we see 90% of the time. So a fixed fee is something that is implicitly billed because it's a part of a fixed fee agreement or a fixed fee project or even a fixed fee ticket. Actual rates is something where if you do an hour of work, you bill an hour of work. And this can be in one of 2 places. It can be on a regular just overage on an agreement, 3 places. An overage on an agreement, 4 places, I should say. An overage on agreement, it could be a project that's billed on an hourly basis. It could be something that's strictly done, you know, somebody calls you up and it's not part of an agreement. And the last one would be is if there's block time. If there's block time and that block time is consumed. Block time really just is prepaid hours. So when you consume those hours, you are earning the money that you've already been paid. So actual rate represents the time put against actual rate type work as opposed to fixed fee type work. I hope that was helpful.
Perfect. Okay. So, and here's where I would look at, are my agreement rates set properly, right? So again, I'm under efficiencies, efficiency by month. And again, I have a little bit of a wide range selected here, so I get a little bit better average data. And you actually have to scroll down to the bottom of the screen to see this by agreement type. But these are the numbers that I'm looking for, right? If I'm on a 0.8, my agreement is priced too low, right? Really my nirvana was that 1.25 number. At a 1.25, I'm doing about $800 worth of work at our normal rates for a $1,000 flat fee, right? That would be a 1.25. So this number here being at a 0.8, I actually have a pricing problem with that type of agreement. This number here being at a 1.92, I believe I've got a bit of a pricing problem there too. It's great. It's definitely great revenue. But if we look over here, I've got this shaded where, you know, this is the center of my green, right? Down here, we're doing too much work for not enough money. Up here, we're getting too much money for not enough work. And, you know, kind of right around here, right around 1.5 or greater, that's where I start feeling uncomfortable that we're going to get a phone call that sounds a lot like, hey, I pay you guys a lot of money It doesn't seem like you do that much for us. And I found this other guy that says he can do it cheaper. And the reality is he can. So I feel like down here, it's a bad client because we're doing too much work. Once you start going above about a 1.5, 1.6, you start running the risk of getting that phone call. And the farther you above a 1.5 you go, the more the risk you're going to get that phone call. So that's why I shaded it red again as we start getting down here. So looking at this, I would kind of say I've got a nervousness around that agreement type and how we've got it priced maybe too high. Now, it's great if you're measuring your client satisfaction and client satisfaction is high and you're doing your quarterly business reviews or business technology reviews, whatever you want to call them, and the client relationship is strong, awesome. Keep getting it, right? That's better. That's a breakthrough for sure. But anyway, so that's the best place I could find to answer this question. Larry, do you have any input or comment on that?
The one thing that I've seen in talking with clients, and I don't have hard data on this, but it does come up every time we see it, and that is if you go across agreement types from silver, gold, platinum, or from on-site or from remote, on-site 5 hours, full on-site, we tend to see we tend to see. Excuse me, 1 second. We tend to see lower efficiency on higher service agreements. By that I mean the more service you offer, when you go from your remote agreement to your on-site agreement to your on-site full-time, you tend to be giving more for what you're paid. And it's a couple of factors that could come into play. One is that you're remote only, you can handle with your call center, that you're cheaper resources, so your shadow billable grows faster. The other is that you're undercharging for the high value work. You may decide that it's okay to have a slightly lower efficiency on those agreements because the margin is larger. That's a discussion that you have to have internally, but something that we have seen is that the more value you deliver, the lower the efficiency tends to be. I see 2 questions here, and I think we want to get to these quickly, and then Rex, if we can, I think it's time to wrap it up.
Okay.
First question is whether or not to look at the current month because it causes the average to be higher. That question I'd like to address and say, by all means, you could look at the current month, but look at it in perspective that it is the current month. If you bill on the 1st, you will have all of your revenue before you accrue your shadow billable. If you're halfway through the month and your target is 1.25, by all means, look at the current month, and halfway through, your target isn't 1.25, your target is 2.5, because you've done half the work. So you certainly can track it that way, but yes, it's not apples to apples. When you have the correct ratio, it's a valuable thing to look at because, the more retrospective you get versus in real time, the harder it is to make real changes as they occur. So certainly it's worth looking at them in real time. Rex, would you agree?
Oh, definitely. It's a difference between a leading indicator and a lagging indicator, right? A lagging indicator, you're looking back at last month, see what happened. A leading indicator is looking at the current month on your flat fee agreement efficiencies. And, 10 days into the month, it should still be above a 3 because you've only done 1/3 of the work. 20 days into the month, you should still be above a 2.5. Is that right?
Yeah.
And then on the 30th day of the month, you should still be above a 1.
Exactly. And one more question here is, this is for you, Rex. What happens if my efficiency, depending on what wage rate I use? The question is, W-2 versus fully burdened versus overhead loaded. Obviously, there's 2 things to consider here. One is this is actually, you're asking 2 separate questions. The cost, so Ethan, the first thing, and then I'll turn it back to Rex. The first question is the cost of the engineer. And for the numbers and the efficiencies we're looking at, we have not touched the cost of the engineer. We're only looking at their billable rate. It's what you would have sold the time for. And if you can have somebody who costs you $60,000 billing at the same amount as someone who costs you $90,000, that's a profitability question for you. It's not a pricing question. What we're looking at here is a pricing question. How much are you charging versus the value you're delivering? So that's actually, to answer your question, it's not directly relevant. The next question you have is, what about, let me answer the question slightly differently. Rex, you had said that you want a certain margin. You want a 33% margin for labor.
Yeah, this is from a different presentation, but I'm saying...
What costs are you looking at, Rex?
Well, in this, I'm just looking at raw pay. It's the easiest calculation to do, and it's the least confusing for your engineers. You know, if you guys are service leadership, best in class is hitting a 2.7 multiple, okay? Which should be somewhere between a 33 and a 40% labor cost here. But that's fully loaded with taxes, benefits, cell phones, ConnectWise licenses, all that stuff. To keep it simple, I'm just saying, look, what you pay them, their salary plus bonuses is what I want to keep under there. But technical services, the ad hoc break fix, you're doing really good if you can have a 50% labor cost or a 2.0 multiple. Professional services, it's more like you're looking for a 40% with a 2.5. Managed services, if you're leveraging tools and technology and people and process and standardization and lowest cost resources and procedure, you should be able to hit a 25% labor cost, which would be a 4 multiple. But if you're doing, you know, a good mix of all three of these, that's where the 33% average kind of combined all services comes from. And this is the number you're seeing in your SLI reports. Again, fully loaded, 2.7, just salary, I'm looking for 3.
Right, so Ethan, to answer your question, you know, if you have a 12% markup for burden, you would then take the multiple down by 12%. Obviously, it gets more complicated if that number is variable, but we're trying to make it simple enough so that it's really applicable on a daily basis.
Here's another slide just to get it in the recording that talks about that monthly leading indicator. You know, on the 10th, you should be at a 3.3, on the 20th at 1.5, and on the 30th at a 1.0 or better. So, okay.
All right. Great, Rex. I want to thank you very much for joining us again today. And one of the things I want to drive home is that, you know, one of the reasons I like working with Rex is because he and I are of the same mind, and that is that data can help you make the business better. When we onboard clients, there's frequently homework that we give to people to clean up their ConnectWise, and I know that's something that C-Level works with their clients as well. There's really a lot of value to that. Having your agreement addition set up properly, having the time put against the agreements correctly, having the right work role and work type correctly can drive you to making some really proactive decisions in your business. And the only thing worse than having no data is having bad data, making a decision based on information that isn't accurate. So yes, there's a little bit of setup work to set up your data, but I think the dividends on that time really could be valuable in driving profitability to your business. I want to thank everybody who joined us today. We did record the call. We're going to do a little write-up and post that on our blog on our new website, which hopefully will be launching in the next couple of weeks. If you have any direct questions, you can reach out to me. Everybody knows how to get in touch with me. Rex, your email is? Do you have a contact me slide? Yeah,
it's rex@clearlevelops.com. Larry, can I hit this last one really quick?
Sure.
And that's just, I want to hit on the 20% rule for are my QBRs working? Your QBR should be pulling about 20% of your MRR out in project revenue. So I was looking at the client P&L page, and I said, okay, well, here's my MRR. And again, I took this over a long average, but then I said, okay, here's my T&M work, and here's my project work, and we're getting about 20%. You know, according to the math here, we're at 18%. So I think at this company, they must be doing their QBRs pretty well to be able to get that. So, okay. And then you asked me about a contact slide. Way at the beginning, and my email address was on there. So,
right. If you want to reach out to Rex, reach out to him there. He is, at this point, the best way to put it, he's a friend of MSPCFO. We are friends with other consultants, so it's not like we have a strong business relationship. I'm not pushing Rex. but I will tell you that in the times that we've worked with him, he's a great resource, and the clients that we know we worked with him have been very happy. We wouldn't send bad people your way. Thank you again, everybody. And we look forward to chatting in the next time. If there's a call that you would like to participate on and lead, we'd love to have you on. I promise to buy any of you a free drink at the next open bar that I happen to be at. We want to make we want to show how MSPCFO is really helping people make their business more profitable. Thank you all very much. Have a great afternoon.
Thanks, everyone.